Have you had a horse that seems really solid at home or in your ideal comfortable environment only to show up when it really counts at an event and then it all falls apart? Maybe you're great in the arena, but once you're on the trail, things get sketchy. Or you're great on the trail, but try to get into an arena and it all falls apart. In my sport of endurance, a lot of times we call this race brain, where things seem great at home and then you show up to a ride start and you have nothing. But what if this isn't a training problem? What if race brain isn't something to train away? But what if it's a revelation into relationship? I just walked through this particular test myself, and I'm going to talk about what I learned on the other side of it in this video today.
Holy moly! White, red, blue. Is this blue? Yep, we missed it. I thought
so. Most riders I know are pretty serious about getting the work done at home. And that's the place to do it, right? Where we have an ideal environment, controlled circumstances. This is where you lay your foundation. For some people, that probably includes some groundwork, some riding, and pressure release, natural horsemanship, and you get that horse as push button as you can, training in what you want to see to be able to compete in your sport. What can be really disconcerting is when you do that work at home and then you show up to the event and you wonder, where did it all go? And then, what do? I've seen two ways to handle this. One of them is you need to regain control. So you clamp down and you do everything you can to regain control of the horse. And the other option seems to be realize that you've pretty much lost control, your horse has taken over, and hold on for the ride. You know those riders who can ride out anything, can stick a horse no matter what comes? That's option number 2. But what if there's actually a third option? What if this experience doesn't reveal your training program, but reveals your connection? What if you could build a connection to withstand the high adrenaline, high intensity competition, real world situations? See, training and compliance isn't the same as connection, but sometimes it takes these experiences to reveal the difference.
I might actually be able to get a little video in here. Oh my goodness. She is a freight train. She's on fire. I hope it sticks for the rest of the day, but right now she's at least kind of calmed down a little. So we're kind of settling in to a good pace, but the morning so far is going good.
Many of you are familiar with Khaleesi. She's what I call my good horse. And I've made some videos about the good horse problem. And she's my endurance horse. I started Khaleesi when she was a 4-year-old, pretty unhandled and feral. And I had a dream to go from 0 to a 100-mile endurance ride with this horse. And when we started, we used a lot of basic pressure release, natural horsemanship type methods in our training. And what I found over time is that I created a compliant and pretty obedient horse that I could rely on and felt pretty solid. But in the end, over time, I found our connection and relationship wasn't what I thought it was. Then I began really intentionally heading towards more relationship and more connection than compliance and obedience. Well, over time, this is working maybe more than I realized. And so here we are at the first ride of the 2026 season with my been there, done that mare, who's been doing some form of endurance or endurance training for 12 years with me. And I find that in the ride camp, she is all abuzz. Usually, her really solid, calm demeanor is picked up slightly by being in the adrenaline-soaked ride camp. And in the ride start, I usually let her run out with the front of the pack because she has motivation, but never out of control. Never what I'd call race brain. And for years before I really settled on riding in a side pull, I actually rode her in a halter through these very adrenaline-packed ride starts with really no concerns at all. Yet this year, here I find myself in ride camp, just warming up, asking her to bring her mind back and get focused with me. And I can feel underneath me the buzzing tension of a horse soaked in excitement. And one of the things I thought I'd try is walking her out of ride camp. So let's get away from all this adrenaline a little bit and kind of regroup. Oh no. When I got to the edge of ride camp, I don't even know how this mare figured out that that wasn't the way to the trail, because truly we've never been here before and it could have been the way out of camp. No, there was a red line at the end of that parking lot and this mare would not cross. Now, this is a horse that I would say I can get to do just about anything at any point. And we've been through some pretty rough situations and come out together. So the fact that there was a red line for her in this world was almost a completely new territory for me. So she started to spin a little and let me know that there was just no way we were going past that line, and I had to make a decision. And in that moment, I made the decision to hear what she was saying and instead to work a little at that red line, so to speak. We did a few circles and I asked her to back up and I asked her to do some side passing, and then we meandered back through camp again, where she seemed content to stay in the game with me and not be completely out of her mind, but I knew what I felt was different. Just having this kind of warm up was very clear to me that we were not going to run out with the front line. When I knew the trail would be open within a minute, I headed off to make a circle in the opposite direction that would bring us back around through ride camp. So we went out after those first racing teams went out, thinking we could just kind of take the middle of the pack, head out at a nice good trot, get some motivation, but not the craziness. Well, I was in for quite a first loop. As soon as we hit the trail, she went into all business mode and she was determined to take on everyone that had gone out in front of us. And we went into what I considered the loop one hostage negotiation. She had never been this determined. Now, as we went, I realized something. So not only was she packed with adrenaline, very excited, determined to do this, and honestly, I had been raising her through the ranks over 12 years to understand that this is your main job. Your main job is to do 50-mile, sometimes 100-mile endurance races. And so this horse is actually doing a fabulous job at the job I gave her. As we went through this first loop, it was at times a little scary and complete brilliance that I have never seen from this horse before. And I went straight into riding the horse I had. And as I look back on that first loop, I realized it was truly a conversation, even negotiation, between two beings who were out to get a job done. She went through almost 15 miles of more athleticism and brilliance in performance than I have ever seen her give. And this horse is now 16 years old. So she's not a spring chicken. She's really in that middle age zone. And yet I would say that this ride in some ways was the height of what I've ever seen for her in performance. I realized I never felt completely out of control. If I gave her a feel from my rein, she was right on it. She would move over. She would take a side pass. She actually did slow down, although I also felt that there was clearly a speed that she was willing to slow down to, and then there was a speed that she preferred that I wasn't willing to go that was faster. And yet I wasn't holding her back physically. When I see the ride photos, the reins didn't have full tension in them, so she wasn't being controlled and held back by me physically. She was taking my input and adjusting. And as I thought this through, this is what a real relationship is about. Two individual beings showing up their full selves and being willing to give input and feedback and to take that input and feedback and adjust. And we both really did that on that first loop. Well, for a moment, I considered if I had completely failed, that everything I had been doing to build a connection with my horse now meant an animal completely wild and out of control and not listening to me at all. Because for a moment, it really did feel very different from what I had experienced with this horse before. But I realized she was not totally out of control. But for the first time maybe ever, she fully showed up. The question was, did our relationship and connection have a firm enough foundation to get us through this thing together to the end? As I spent some time unpacking this experience, which was honestly pretty new for me, I was thinking about the different ways we can address something like race brain. And if you're not an endurance rider, it could be when you show up with your horse to jump that course in the event, or when you're going out into the dressage arena and the judges are watching. It's that moment in the real world where adrenaline, both in you and your horse, can take over, and you have to figure out how you're going to make it through in the best form. I know people really look for good training, and they talk about having solid foundation of training on their horse. Truly, if you can get some good push button compliance and a horse that thrives under that and that will submit to that training, because a lot of horses will, and some, as we know, really they won't in the end. But if you have a horse that compliance works with, you may find that these adrenaline moments are less of a big deal. And what I found with Khaleesi was, for many years, that's where we were. I could trust the training and the time that we had put in settling these matters at home. And when we showed up and the adrenaline was high, she really wasn't all that different. It was just a slight little edge. But the cost of that, I'm finding now, is that I didn't even know the depth of brilliance of performance that this horse had available if I would allow her to really show up. The other half is that when you get this moment and the horse goes into adrenaline mode, if your only option is to just clamp down and try to regain full control of your creature, the thing I hear from the riders at endurance rides is that their arms and their shoulders are exhausted because they are manhandling and physically holding that horse into compliance for hours before the horse is actually tired enough to come back into more willing control that they're used to seeing at home. See, sometimes the training and compliance we have at home, it's just not enough to take on the adrenaline of the big day. I think actually there's another way. And at endurance rides, it's those riders who just hang on and they make it to the end and the horse shows up fully, but the rider basically has to disappear. If you disappear enough and don't get in the conversation, then the horse might let you go along for the ride. But I've also seen some of these wrecks, unfortunately, where the horse just doesn't want the human along for the ride and dumps them at some point. But that horse is giving a brilliant amount of performance, but it doesn't have the ability to take input because, again, that connection and relationship hasn't been built enough to withstand the connection needed for race day. The other problem with these horses, if the rider is able to just ride it out, is these are the ones I think sometimes get into trouble. And in endurance, we have metabolic issues. When the horse really just goes on adrenaline and overrides their abilities, they can get pretty sick and dehydrated or loss of electrolytes and need medical attention. So we do, as riders, need to have some input into how a horse goes through their competition. I do believe there's another way. And it's the connection path. Thing with the connection path, though, is it takes some guts. It takes courage to actually invite your horse to really show up. It takes courage to give them some input into the conversation. And then it takes courage to stay in the conversation and give feedback back without having to have total control or without disappearing completely and letting the horse completely take over and what we say, do its job. To actually have a relationship where both entities are present and have input into the conversation is not easy, especially with an animal. This foundation takes the time of building trust. I've got to trust my horse, and my horse has to trust me, and we have to learn what each other's limits are so that we can figure out where those negotiations can be successful when the big day comes, and where we may just really need to compromise in order to survive, both of us, intact through the deep end of the ocean.
We're around mile 14, and she's been taking this 20-mile loop at a really nice, controlled, but good trot. So the day continues to go well for us. We've made a friend.
But after this experience at our Lizard Run 50-mile endurance ride, I'm convinced more than ever that it's worth it. Yes, at times I even found it to be a little scary to really see my horse show up and be fully present, but there were moments on that loop when she was so light and so athletic and so brilliant, and trotting and cantering and even hand galloping through these amazing trails with a strength I have never seen her exhibit before, that I am convinced it's worth the effort to create the connection that can withstand going through that together in as safe as possible way. And the thing is, at home we have ideal circumstances, and we build and we work and we build trust and we do what we can to put a solid foundation. And yes, training is part of that. But when we get into these unideal circumstances, what I sometimes call the deep end of the pool or the deep end of the ocean, which is even more scary, we're going to need something to rely on. And for me, I'm hoping that my connection is what's going to help us get through together, and not just a hope that I can regain control over an animal who is clearly able to outpower me if she decided to. So once again, I believe this isn't about a training technique. It's about an approach and how you see your relationship with your horse.
We completed and are now headed over to find the good grass, which is over here. I promised a few minutes in the amazing tall grass for the winter in my world.
The more I look at the value system that I have and how I work with horses, the more I realize it's not for the faint of heart, and it takes a lot of guts. Connection has almost become a buzzword in the horse world. A lot of people talk about finding connection with their horse, and there are people who find really good compliance and they find it works for them when they get into these situations. I understand there's not a problem there and they don't want to fix it, and that is okay. This road can be a challenge, and it's great to have people to walk alongside you. We have a community that talks through these things that we're going through, each with our individual horse and our individual needs, and yet with the same goals in mind. If you're somebody who's walking down the path of really seeking a connected relationship where you and your horse are both showing up to have these conversations, please consider joining our community. We love having more people to walk that road out with us. And if you need some help as you're trying to figure out some of the ins and outs of how this works real time, I love talking these things through and helping. I can work with you virtually or in person if you're around Virginia. Contact me at jamie@hopehorsemanship.com and we'll connect you in. Thanks for being part of this conversation. Leave a note in the comments, and I'd love to hear your own experiences as you've tested your own foundations with your horse. Until the next time, have a great day.
Just about halfway through loop 3. Probably my lens is kind of, let's see, it's a little sweaty. That's a little better. This is about as desolate a wilderness as one can be, around mile 40. With a horse that's like, it's got knocked, all my friends are gone, and we're just making it through the wilderness. But once you survive the wilderness, on the other side, life is always better. As promised, this is the Paradise Finish grass field with my ace crew, Brandy and Abigail, who came to save the day. Through. Yeah, it was a nice day. She did really well.